Maple Street was like any other street in suburbia. Neat lawns, shiny cars. The houses all looked the same, except for one. At the end of the street stood an old house. It was a Victorian mansion, 3 stories high. Its paint was peeling and the garden was overgrown. Locals whispered about the house. They said it was haunted. No one dared to go near it. Children avoided it on their way to school. Even the mailman left mail at the gate. The house stood alone, shrouded in an eerie silence. It was a stark contrast to the cheerful normalcy of Maple Street, a dark secret hidden in plain sight. The Miller family arrived on a sunny afternoon. John, Mary, and their 2 children, Tom and Lily. They were excited to start their new life. The house was big enough for their growing family, and the price was surprisingly low. John dismissed the rumors about the house. He saw a fixer-upper, a diamond in the rough. Mary had her doubts, but she kept them to herself. She wanted to support her husband. The children were too young to understand. They saw a big house with a garden to play in. For a brief time, laughter filled the old house. The Millers seemed happy, oblivious to the darkness that lurked within. The joy was short-lived. The family had just moved into what they thought was their dream home, a place where they could create beautiful memories. But soon, the atmosphere in the house began to change. The laughter that once filled the rooms was replaced by an unsettling silence. The once happy moments turned into tense and anxious ones. Strange things started to happen, whispers in the night. It was as if the house had a life of its own, speaking in hushed tones when the lights went out. The family would lie in bed, straining to hear the source of the whispers, but they could never pinpoint where they were coming from. Objects moving on their own. Chairs would be found in different positions and toys would be scattered across the floor, even though no one had touched them. It was as if an unseen force was playing tricks on them, making them question their own sanity.
Mommy, there's something in my room! Tom's voice would tremble with fear as he called out in the middle of the night. His small finger would point towards the dark corners of his room, where he claimed to see shadows moving.
Tom, the youngest, began to see things. He would describe figures that no one else could see, and his vivid descriptions would send chills down their spines. The family tried to comfort him, but his fear was palpable. He would wake up screaming, pointing at shadows in his room. His nightmares were so intense that he would be drenched in sweat, his eyes wide with terror. The shadows seemed to have a hold on him, invading his dreams and turning them into horrifying visions.
It's just your imagination, sweetheart. Old houses make noises. Mary would try to reassure Tom, holding him close and whispering soothing words. She wanted to believe that it was all just a figment of his imagination, a phase that he would eventually outgrow.
Mary tried to rationalize it. She would tell herself that old houses had their quirks, that the creaks and groans were just the house settling, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. An old house had its quirks. The vintage charm that had initially attracted them now seemed to hide a sinister presence. The walls that once felt warm and inviting now felt cold and unwelcoming. But John couldn't shake the feeling of unease. He would walk through the house feeling as if he was being watched. The hairs on the back of his neck would stand up, and he would find himself looking over his shoulder, expecting to see someone, or something, lurking in the shadows.
I don't know, Mary. Something feels off. John's voice was filled with uncertainty and fear. He couldn't explain it, but he knew that the house was affecting him in ways he couldn't understand.
His cheerful demeanor began to fade. The man who once brought joy and laughter to the family was now a shadow of his former self. The weight of the house's presence seemed to be crushing his spirit. He became withdrawn and irritable. He started having nightmares. The dreams were so vivid and terrifying that he would wake up in a cold sweat, his heart racing. The fear from his dreams would linger, affecting his mood and behavior throughout the day. The nightmares soon turned into hallucinations. He would see things that weren't there, shadows that moved on their own, and figures that seemed to disappear as soon as he tried to focus on them. He saw shadowy figures lurking in the corners of the house. They would appear out of the corner of his eye, only to vanish when he turned to look directly at them. The figures seemed to be taunting him, playing with his mind. He heard voices whispering his name. The whispers were soft but persistent, calling out to him in the dead of night. No matter how hard he tried to ignore them, they would always find a way to reach him. The house was changing him. The once vibrant and happy man was now a shell of his former self, consumed by fear and paranoia. The house had a hold on him, and it wasn't letting go. Then came the night of the tragedy. The neighbors were awoken by screams. Police sirens wailed in the distance. The news spread like wildfire. John Miller had snapped. He had brutally murdered his wife and children, then turned the knife on himself. The police were baffled.
John, what are you doing? No, please.
Daddy, stop, please!
Daddy, no!
They found no motive, no history of violence. John Miller was a loving husband and father, or so everyone thought. The house on Maple Street claimed another family. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the community. It confirmed what the locals had always feared. The house was cursed. The house stood empty after the tragedy. Nobody dared to live there. Not even the bravest soul would step foot inside. It became a morbid tourist attraction. People would come from far and wide to gawk at the house. They would take pictures and spin tales of the horrors that transpired within its walls. But no one stayed for too long. The house on Maple Street became a symbol of death and despair, a reminder that even in the most ordinary of places, evil can lurk. The paint chipped away. The garden became a tangled mess. The house was left to rot, a testament to its dark history. Years passed slowly. The story of the Miller family became a local legend, whispered by many. Told and retold around campfires and in hushed tones, it spread. Each retelling added a new layer of horror. The house remained untouched, eerie, a constant reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded there. People started to report strange occurrences near the house. Unexplained noises echoed, shadows moving in the windows, unsettling everyone. Some said they saw the ghostly figures of the Miller family, haunting, trapped within the house that had taken their lives forever. The legend of the haunted house on Maple Street lived on, undying. Fueled by fear and speculation, it thrived. Then, one day, a for sale sign appeared outside the house. A young couple, the Andersons, bought it. They were unaware of the house's history, or they chose to ignore it. They were determined to make the house their own. They saw it as a fresh start, a chance to create new memories. They dismissed the stories as folklore.
We don't believe in all that. This is our home now, and we're going to fill it with love and laughter.
The neighbors watched with a mixture of curiosity and dread. They knew the truth about the house. They knew what awaited the unsuspecting family. At first, everything seemed normal. The house stood quietly, basking in the sunlight, giving no hint of the secrets it held within its walls. The Andersons worked tirelessly to renovate the house. They painted the walls, planted flowers, and poured their hearts into making it a home. Every brushstroke and planted seed was a step towards their dream. They filled the rooms with their belongings, each item carefully chosen to reflect their tastes and personalities. The house began to take on a new life, one that mirrored the Andersons' hopes and aspirations. They held a housewarming party, inviting friends and neighbors to share in their joy. The laughter and chatter filled the air, creating a sense of warmth and community. The neighbors attended out of obligation, their smiles strained. There was an unspoken tension, a sense that something was not quite right. The Andersons noticed the unease but brushed it off as mere unfamiliarity. The house seemed to be resisting the Andersons' attempts to change it. No matter how much they tried to modernize and brighten the space, an underlying darkness persisted.
It's strange. No matter what we do, the house just feels heavy. It's as if the walls themselves are whispering secrets we can't quite hear.
The air remained heavy despite the fresh paint. The vibrant colors couldn't mask the oppressive atmosphere that seemed to seep from the very foundation. A feeling of unease lingered in every corner. Shadows seemed to stretch and twist, creating shapes that played tricks on the mind. It wasn't long before the strange occurrences began. The house, once a symbol of hope, started to reveal its true nature. Footsteps in the middle of the night, the sound of someone walking even when no one was there, echoed through the halls, sending chills down their spines. Whispers echoing through the empty halls. Faint, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to come from the walls themselves, as if the house was trying to communicate. Objects moving on their own, chairs sliding across the floor, doors creaking open, and lights flickering without reason. The house was alive with a presence they couldn't see. The Andersons tried to ignore it. They rationalized the events, attributing them to old house quirks or their imaginations running wild. But deep down, they knew something was wrong. But the house had other plans. It was as if it had a will of its own, determined to make its presence known. The Andersons were no longer just residents. They were part of the house's story, whether they liked it or not. The occurrences escalated. The whispers became screams. What started as faint murmurs in the dead of night soon turned into blood-curdling cries that echoed through the hallways, making sleep an impossible luxury. The shadows took on menacing forms. They seemed to move with a life of their own, creeping along the walls and floors, creating an atmosphere of constant dread. Every corner of the house felt alive with unseen eyes watching their every move. The Andersons were plagued by nightmares. Each night brought new horrors, vivid and terrifying dreams that left them waking in cold sweats, their hearts pounding in their chests. The line between reality and nightmare began to blur. Their young daughter claimed to see a man and a woman watching her from the shadows. She described them in chilling detail, their hollow eyes and twisted smiles haunting her every waking moment. Her once bright and cheerful demeanor was replaced by a constant state of fear. Their once happy home had become a prison of fear. The laughter and joy that once filled the rooms were replaced by silence and tension. The walls seemed to close in on them, suffocating their spirits and leaving them in a perpetual state of anxiety. The Andersons tried to hold on. They clung to each other, seeking comfort in their shared ordeal. They tried to rationalize the unexplainable, hoping that their unity would be enough to drive away the darkness that had taken over their lives.
We can't stay here anymore. We have to leave. Now. The urgency in their voices was palpable, driven by the realization that their safety and sanity were at stake. They knew that staying any longer would mean succumbing to the same fate as those before them.
They refused to believe that history was repeating itself. Despite the mounting evidence, they clung to the hope that they could escape the house's sinister grip. But deep down, they knew that the house had other plans. But the house was relentless. It seemed to feed on their fear, growing stronger with each passing day. The walls whispered secrets, and the floors creaked under the weight of unseen footsteps. The house was alive, and it wanted them to stay. It chipped away at their sanity, just as it had done to the Millers. The previous occupants had also tried to fight back, but the house had broken them, one by one. The Andersons were no different, and they could feel their resolve weakening. One by one, the Andersons broke. The constant fear and tension took its toll, leaving them emotionally and mentally exhausted. They could no longer deny the truth. The house was winning. They packed their belongings in haste, fleeing the house in the dead of night. They left everything behind. The decision was made in a moment of clarity, driven by the primal need to survive. They knew that they had to escape before it was too late. Furniture, clothes, toys, all the remnants of their lives were left behind, scattered and abandoned. The house stood as a silent witness to their flight, its dark corridors echoing with the memories of their fear, a testament to their terror. The once vibrant home was now a hollow shell, filled with the echoes of their past happiness and the shadows of their nightmares. The Andersons had escaped, but the house remained, waiting for its next victims. The house on Maple Street stood empty once more. The for sale sign lay discarded on the overgrown lawn. The cycle of hope and horror had played out again. The house remained a stark reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of the ordinary. Some houses, it seemed, could never truly be homes. They were vessels of sorrow, forever marked by the tragedies they had witnessed. The house on Maple Street stood alone, its windows dark, like empty eyes staring out at the world. It was a symbol of fear, a monument to the unknown, and it would continue to stand there, silent and watchful, waiting for its next victims.